You wake up at 3 in the morning. Not from a nightmare, not from noise. You just open your eyes, wide awake, in the middle of the night, for no obvious reason at all. And then, annoyed, you spend the next hour convincing yourself something is wrong with you. The real answer is far stranger than insomnia. For most of human history, waking up in the dead of night wasn't a disorder. It was simply what a normal night looked like. Start with a question you've probably never asked. Why do you assume sleep is supposed to be one long, unbroken block? 8 hours? Start to finish? No interruptions? That assumption feels obvious. It feels biological, but it's mostly a modern habit, and a surprisingly recent one at that. A historian named A. Roger Ekirch spent years digging through old court records, diaries, medical texts, and literature from pre-industrial Europe, looking for offhand references to sleep. What he found was remarkable. Hundreds of documents spanning centuries casually mention something called first sleep and second sleep, as though everyone already understood exactly what that meant. People described going to bed shortly after dark, sleeping for several hours, waking naturally in the middle of the night for an hour or so, and then falling back asleep until morning. This wasn't described as unusual. It wasn't treated as a problem to be solved. It was simply how a night passed. Think about what people actually did during that waking hour between the two sleeps. Ekirch's research uncovered references to prayer, quiet conversation with a bed partner, tending to a fire, even visiting neighbors. Some medical texts of the era gave advice for what to do during this period, treating it as a normal, expected part of the night, the same way you might casually mention what you do during a lunch break. Doesn't it seem strange that an entire pattern of nightly life could exist for centuries and then simply vanish, so completely that most people alive today have never heard of it? Here's where the story gets scientific rather than just historical. In the 1990s, a psychiatrist named Thomas Wehr ran an experiment that accidentally recreated exactly this pattern. He placed a group of participants in an environment with 14 hours of darkness each night, roughly matching the length of a winter night before artificial lighting existed, and removed all clocks and light cues. After several weeks of adjustment, something unexpected happened. The participants' sleep spontaneously split into two distinct segments, separated by 1 to 3 hours of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night, almost perfectly matching the first sleep and second sleep pattern Ekirch had found buried in centuries-old documents. Modern brains, given enough darkness and no artificial light, reorganize themselves into exactly the sleep pattern your ancestors described as ordinary. So what changed? The honest answer is embarrassingly simple. Artificial light changed. For most of human history, night meant near total darkness, broken only by firelight, moonlight, or the occasional candle, none of which were bright enough to meaningfully disrupt your internal clock. Winter nights, especially at higher latitudes, could stretch for 14 or 15 hours. That's an enormous amount of darkness to fill, far more than a single continuous block of sleep typically requires. A natural pause in the middle wasn't inefficient. It was simply what a body does when given far more nighttime than a full sleep cycle actually needs. Then came widespread artificial lighting, starting with gas lamps and later electric bulbs, compressing the useful hours of darkness and pushing bedtimes later while keeping wake times roughly fixed for work and school. Almost overnight, in evolutionary terms, humans went from stretching sleep across a long, dark night with a natural pause in the middle, to cramming sleep into a much shorter, artificially lit window with no pause at all. The segmented pattern didn't disappear because it was broken. It disappeared because the environment that produced it disappeared first. This reframes something important about that 3 a.m. wake-up you've probably experienced and worried about. Sleep researchers studying circadian rhythms have found that spontaneous nighttime waking, especially occurring at a consistent point partway through the night, is common, and, in many cases, not actually indicative of a sleep disorder at all. Your body isn't necessarily malfunctioning when it wakes you in the dead of night. It might simply be reaching for a rhythm that predates modern lighting by thousands of years. A rhythm your ancestors would have recognized immediately and responded to calmly, without panic, without checking a clock, without labeling it a problem. Here's the twist that makes this even stranger. The anxiety many people feel during a middle-of-the-night waking, the racing thoughts, the worry about not falling back asleep, the frustration at wasting time awake, may itself be a modern invention layered on top of an ancient biological pattern. Your ancestors, waking during that quiet hour, weren't lying there anxious about lost sleep efficiency. They prayed, or talked quietly, or simply rested in the dark, trusting that sleep would return. The biological event hasn't necessarily changed all that much. What's changed is the meaning you've been taught to attach to it. Think about how differently a modern person and a pre-industrial person might experience the exact same physiological moment. Both wake in darkness after several hours of sleep. Both lie there, alert, unhurried by any external demand. But one checks a glowing phone screen, sees the time, does the math on how many hours remain before an alarm, and feels a jolt of stress that makes falling back asleep even harder. The other simply exists in the dark for a while, unbothered, until sleep naturally returns. The interruption is identical. The response to it is almost entirely learned. This doesn't mean everyone secretly needs segmented sleep, or that modern consolidated sleep is somehow wrong. Most people today, living under electric light with fixed schedules, sleep in a single block just fine, and there's solid research supporting consolidated sleep as healthy and effective for most modern lifestyles. But understanding where the anxiety around night waking actually comes from can change how you respond to it. The wakefulness itself might be ordinary, ancient, even. It's the fear wrapped around it that's almost entirely new. So the next time you open your eyes at 3 in the morning for no obvious reason, before you reach for your phone, before you start doing anxious math about lost sleep, consider a different response. Somewhere in the dark, centuries of your ancestors did exactly what you're doing right now, and simply waited, unbothered, for the second sleep to come. Tonight, when the sun goes down and you eventually close your eyes, and you find yourself awake again hours later in the quiet dark, remember this: you haven't failed at sleeping. You've arrived, briefly, at the exact rhythm your ancestors lived inside every single night, long before anyone thought to call it strange.